All right, so let's come back to our discussion, right? So where we are. So in the first part of today's discussion, we look at each individual country's production possibility frontier, find out their opportunity cost of producing each individual goods, right? And then so we compare their opportunity cost of each goods, and typically their opportunity cost is different. And then so difference in terms of their opportunity cost is going to give rise to the notion of comparative advantage. The comparative advantage says whoever has lower opportunity cost in producing that goods, and then that country is going to be specialized in doing that, right? So in this case, I just erase everything and then so remind you. So in this example, all right, so we look at opportunity costs, this opportunity cost, but opportunity costs for different goods. On the top, so it's the opportunity cost of small jet. On the bottom is the opportunity cost of large jet, right? For US, the opportunity cost of producing small jet is 3/4. Brazil, the opportunity cost of small jet is 1/3. But this opportunity cost is in terms of a larger jet, Now, by comparing the opportunity cost, we realize Brazilian, they have comparative advantage in producing small jet. Right? So, or Brazilian is specialized in small jet. Why? Because they can produce small jet in a lower cost in terms of larger jet. Now, on the other hand, US has a smaller cost in producing larger jet, right? Because it costs 4/3 to produce larger jet, 4/3 of small jet to produce one larger jet. But for Brazilian, it's going to cost 3 small jet to produce one larger jet. And then we said US, let's go to here, US, they specialized in large jet, right? Okay, now we are ready to see how they are going to benefit from trading each other. Okay, where we start. So without trade, this is what US is going to consume, 18 versus 16. Without trade, this Brazilian is going to consume 8 versus 6. So this is before trade. Now, if they decide to trade each other, okay, and then so they are going to cooperate, right? So now, once they decide to cooperate, okay, and then so the idea of comparative advantage tells you you must produce what you are specialized. That means the US, they are going to move to here. They are going to only produce larger jet, 30 larger jet. And on the other hand, Brazilian, they are going to specialize small jet. They're going to produce 30 small jet, right? So now, even without further calculation, you will immediately realize the world production is going to more than you produce before trade. Why is that? We can do the simple calculation. So before trade, the world is going to produce 18 plus this 18 plus 8, which is 26 larger jet. Let me write down. Before trade, 26 large. Before trade, they are going to produce 16 plus 6, which is 22 small jet. Now, after trade, but again, so I haven't tell you how they're going to trade yet. So far, we just say, okay, so they agree to cooperate. They agree to specialize. And then US is going to produce 30 larger jet. This after 30 larger jet. And this Brazilian is going to produce 30 small jet. From here, you can clearly see, oh, by the way, this is before. This is after. So now clearly you can see the trade is going to allow the world to collectively produce more than we can before trade, right? Because 30 is larger than 26, 30 is larger than 22, right? So this is the first step. Now this first step is not enough, because this first step doesn't tell us how they are going to cooperate. And furthermore, the first step doesn't tell us whether they are going to happy or whether they are going to agree to join the cooperation or not. So far, we only know 30 is greater than 26, 30 is greater than 22, right? So now I'm going to tell you how they are going to happily join the club of cooperation, right? Okay, start with larger jet. US, they specialize producing larger jet, so they only have larger jet. And then but the US, they prefer consume both larger jet and small jet. We already knew that, right? This is before trade. Right? But after they decide to join this international trade club, so US, they only have larger jet in hand. Then what they're gonna do? So they must trade, and then they must sell larger jet. As a return, they get some small jet. All right. So now they want to sell their larger jet. So at what price? Now the secret lies here. Lies into here. Right? Okay. So the same example, the price is going to be 2. Meaning for each larger jet American produce, they can sell for 2 small jets in the international market or to Brazilian. Okay. Now the question is, will this going to be a deal for both American and Brazilian? The answer is a definitely yes. Now let's see why this is a definitely yes. Again, start with American. So American, they have larger jet. If they sell the larger jet at a price of 2 small jet, meaning they are going to benefit. Why? If they decide to produce a small jet themselves. Okay? And then, so what is the opportunity cost? So the opportunity cost is going to, okay, so if they give up a larger jet, then they are going to, means they can only produce this amount of small jet, right? 3/3 of small jet. Now, in the international market, they can sell for 2. So in the international market,
أقل 1 2 3 4 5 6
in the international market,
والكتيفين مال كريدت.
can you mute yourself? Someone is talking on the phone. Right. So
زي سويت بلان تخوض 2021 فول.
Someone is on the phone, so can you mute yourself?
19 كريدت.
You muted your mic.
Oh, I apologize. So there was one student who was talking on the phone, so interrupt our class, and then I unmute everyone. I apologize. So now it's back to our business. I apologize. So where we are, so we are saying, oh, so there's a larger jet. Now it's a U.S. specialized producing larger jet, right? And so, but they want small jet, right? And then so if they want small jet, they must get small jet into the market. Now what we propose is, so the larger jet is going to sell for 2 small jet. So larger jet sell for 2 small jet. This is going to be a good thing for United States because this larger jet for them is only cost 1/4 of small jet. Now they can sell for 2. So this is greater than their cost. So they're going to get. Now let's look at Brazilian, see whether they like it or not. Okay, Brazilian. So what they only have small jet. They also want larger jet, right? But in order to produce a larger jet, they have to give up 3 small jet. Now in the international market, the market says, okay, so I can sell larger jet for 2 small jet. So this 2 is less than 3. So meaning Brazilian is going to happily take the deal. So now what that means? This means, okay, so in the international market, these 2, the new price, the price for larger jet in terms of small jet is going to make both American and Brazilian happy. So this 2 is higher than the cost for American and then lower than the cost for Brazilian, right? So these 2 is going to make both happy. And the reason why it's making both happy is because American and Brazilian, they have different opportunity costs of larger jet. So this difference allows a room for them to trade, right? So this difference just makes someone who specialized or who has lower opportunity costs is going to produce that thing and sell to someone who has higher opportunity costs, who is going to specialize and produce something else. So that is the secret, right? So now let's just erase everything. So finally, we need to discuss a more fundamental question, right? So let's just focus on larger jet, this row, okay? Larger jet. So clearly, so American has smaller opportunity costs than Brazilian. So that is why American, they are specialized producing larger jet, and then they are going to sell to Brazilian. Okay, in order to make the deal, is a deal for both. So this price must make both happy, and then we just propose a 2. So this price is going to make American happy because this price higher than their opportunity cost. This price is going to make Brazilian happy because this price is lower than their opportunity cost. Right? Okay, for Americans, so this is higher than opportunity cost, essentially it's higher than their cost because they are producing that. So if I get paid higher than what I have to pay, okay, and then it's good. But for Brazilian, so this is good, right? Because otherwise I have to pay higher price to produce. Because actually for Brazilian, so they are buying it too. For American, they are selling it too. But for Brazilian, they are buying it too. So that's the difference. All right. So now the final question is, yes, this too is going to make everyone happy. But it seems like there's a big range of international price that's going to make both happy. Say, for example, if this 2.5, this is going to make American even happier, but somehow make Brazil less happy, right? Why is that? Because this 2.5 is going to make American gain more, but this 2.5 is going to make Brazilian gain less. Now the question is, how we are going to know which price is going to be, or how we are going to know which price is going to be determined. And then the answer to that question is a little bit beyond the discussion of economics. right? And because this is, in some sense, is going to depending on the bargaining power of the country, right? So 2.5 is going to benefit US more, probably because US has more bargaining power in international market. On the other hand, 2 is going to benefit Brazilian more, and it could be the case Brazilian has more bargaining power. But at the end of the day, which price is going to rise is going to depend on who has more bargaining power. All right. So now hopefully we understand how trade is going to benefit and how we are going to gain from trade, right? Okay. So summarize these slides. So see, we move to here. And similarly, see, Brazilian moved here. Now, we move from 26 to 30 and 22 to 30. We have that calculation before, right? Now, with this new cooperation, so US can sell larger jet and the exchange gets small jet. Now, interestingly, so US, they can consume this amount by selling larger jet. And similarly, Brazilian, they can consume this amount by selling small jet. And if you compare before and after, you can see, so US, they are going to consume what was infeasible, because this point was infeasible before. Similarly, Brazilian is going to consume what was infeasible before, right? Because this point was infeasible beyond their PBF. And from here, you can see both countries gain. They gain from trade, and they gain by exploiting their comparative advantage, right? So that's the secret of international trade. Okay, but finally, I want to emphasize, so when we are here, so there's a price. Let me write down price. And this is a price for trade, right? So the price lies between their own opportunity costs, right? And the price is going to be higher than the opportunity cost for whoever produce. Meaning, so I sell at a higher price than my cost. And the price is lower than whoever is going to buy. And meaning, so I find a bargain in the international market. So this is going to benefit both seller who specialize in producing that and a buyer who specialize producing something else. Right, so this is comparative advantage. So now we move a different concept. Absolute advantage is different from comparative advantage. Absolute advantage says the country can produce more output per worker than the other country. US can produce more larger jet compared to Brazil. And interesting, US can also produce more small jet than Brazil. So this means US not only has absolute advantage in larger jet, it also has absolute advantage in small jet, right? But there's pitfalls. There's something you want to be careful. Do not confuse absolute advantage with comparative advantage. Right? Just because the United States can produce more of both goods doesn't mean we are better off without trade. Or even though US can produce more of both goods, US has absolute advantage in both large and small jet. US still can benefit from trading with its trading partner, or it still can benefit from trading with someone has absolute disadvantage, right? So that's very important. So this is also the secret of comparative advantage. So we want to pay attention to opportunity cost, right? Meaning whoever has cheaper cost in producing something, right? Now let's look at this practice question. You need to do some calculation yourself. Let's work this together. Texia specializes in food. It can produce 1,000 and 0 clothing. If it is specialized, if it specializes in food, it produces 1,000 versus 0. If it specializes in clothing, produce 500 versus 0. Other economy, Urbania, produce either 500 unit food and 0 unit of clothing, or 200 units clothing, or 0 unit of food. Now question part 1, who has absolute advantage? Maybe we can write down T and U. Okay, so T, they produce 1,000 food or 0, and Urbania so produce 500 or 0. On the other hand, TE can produce 0 food, 500 clothing. Urbania can produce 0 food or 200 clothing. Right? And who has absolute advantage in producing clothing? Apparently, Texia, right? Because produce 1,000 versus 500. And Texia also has absolute advantage in producing food. This is because 500 is greater than 200. Right? So the answer is A. Okay? Same questions. Now we look at comparative advantage. So we unfortunately have to write again T versus U. 1,000, 0, 0, 500. This is 500, 0, 0, 200. Okay, start with the comparative advantage in clothing. Now we need to calculate. Okay, so the opportunity cost of clothing in Texia. What is the opportunity cost of clothing in Texia? So let's go here. In Texia, the opportunity cost of clothing is, so they must give up 1,000 food, right? Which is equal to 2. But in Urbania, what is the opportunity cost of clothing? The clothing costs 500. Right? So they give up 500 food to get 200 clothing, equal to 2.5. And then clearly, Texia has comparative advantage in production of clothing because it costs 2 versus 2.5 in Urbania. Right? Now, who has comparative advantage in the production of food? So we just do the reverse, right? Now, if we look at Texia, what is the opportunity cost of food? The food must equal to inverse of inverse of the opportunity cost of clothing, right? They equal to 1/2. And Urbania, so the opportunity cost of food is going to be inverse of the opportunity cost of clothing, equal to 1 divided by 2.5. Now, clearly, Urbania has comparative advantage in the production of food. Or in general, or in general, if country has comparative advantage in producing A, and then it must has disadvantage in producing B. You cannot have comparative advantage in both, right? Now, one more practice question. If a country specializes according to its own comparative advantage and then trade with other nations, let's go one by one. It will operate at a point inside its production possibility frontier. This is not trade, right? So actually they are going to operate outside. That's the point of trade. B, it can consume at a higher level than the domestic production possibility frontier. It is true, right? C is PBF will shift or rotate inward. That's not correct. PBF stay the same. They just choose different point on the PBF, right? D, it can consume at the same level as a domestic PBF. That's not true, right? So they specialize and then they trade, they consume more than they can. Okay, so the answer is B. Now, so we have a discussion. You're supposed to discuss. So what do you think? Would the US economy be better off if we did not import so much clothing from Bangladesh? List the group who you think would gain and the group who would lose if Bangladesh clothing imports were restricted. So I give you 1 minute. You reflect on the question. And if you like, you can send me through chat. Let me see. Okay, I give you 1 minute to reflect. And then so we can have a discussion or I can give you my opinion. All right, let's do this discussion together, right? So first we need to identify what they are trading. They are trading clothing. As the US is trading with Bangladesh by purchasing or importing clothing from Bangladesh. You ask your question, so why we want to do that as a US economy? So the reason why we want to import clothing from Bangladesh must be the case, the opportunity cost is lower in Bangladesh, right? So this opportunity cost of producing clothing is lower in Bangladesh compared in the United States. So it's better we let whoever specializes in producing clothes to produce that and we purchase that from Bangladesh. But now we must realize everything has a trade-off. If we do trade with Bangladesh or if we import clothing from Bangladesh. Then we are going to have facing the trade-off. What is the trade-off? So first, let's look at the plus and the negative. Okay? So plus. So we are going to benefit by lower price. Why? Because Bangladesh, they are good at producing clothing. They have a cheaper price, right? So that's why we want to import from them. So it's going to benefit this is going to benefit domestic households. What is the cost? The cost is, so whoever work in this industry, they're going to lose. Meaning, so you may see unemployment. Right? So people may lose a job because so we demand less domestic made clothing. Then we may see unemployment. Okay? And so now given this trade-off, should we restrict clothing imports or not? This is similar to the earlier discussion in 200 years ago, Corn Law. Should we restrict the import of clothing from Bangladesh so that we can protect domestic clothing producer? The answer most likely is going to be negative. Why? Even though this is going to generate unemployment, right? But simply protect them by restricting import is not a good idea. Why? First, that's going to raise the price. That's going to hurt most customers. And number two, because US specializes in higher technology, right? Instead of protect those people who lost their job because of this import from Bangladesh, of this low value added goods, maybe a better solution is trying to retrain those workers who lost their job due to this importing, and then help them to gain better skill, better technology, so they have a better job. And consequently, so the US economy becomes stronger. That probably is a better solution instead of simply restrict the imports. All right. So feel free to send me message or emails if you have thoughts on these questions. Right. So now we close today's discussion by looking at these practice questions. Suppose that in Australia, it takes 2 hours to harvest 10 bushels of apples and 4 hours to harvest 10 bushels of tomatoes. Suppose a worker in Brazil can harvest 10 bushels of apples in 4 hours or 10 bushels of tomatoes in 5 hours. Which of the statements is true? So to answer this one, you need to find out their opportunity cost. And it's better you put down a table as we have done before, right? So I guess we pretty much run out of time. So why not you read this question, and then so we can discuss this when we meet